Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. My name is Jim Johnson. This is where we turn chaos into wisdom. 25 years ago, in my first chaos report, I wrote, if you begin with failure and learn to evaluate it, you will also learn to succeed. Failure begets knowledge. Out of knowledge, you gain wisdom, and it is with wisdom that you can become truly successful. In this program, we hope to turn chaos into wisdom. The topic of today's show is ethics in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Our special guest today is Minerva Tantoco. Minerva is a veteran of AI and ML technology advancements. So I want to ask you, from your perspective, Minerva, what is the history of AI and ML over the last 3 decades?
What's happened in the last 30 years was the advent of 3 key major revolutions. One was the massive amounts of data available, right? That could be used for the automation and processing of rules and rules engines. The second was the incredible, connectivity of computers that the internet brought us in the 80s and 90s. And the third was, the sheer compute power. Fast forward to today, because of the technology capabilities have so greatly expanded our ability and advances in the computational techniques have really brought us to where we are now.
Minerva, why should we be concerned about ethics in artificial intelligence and machine learning?
AI in everyday life, right? Where you applied for a loan or you apply for a job or, even something as simple as getting customer service involves, some form of AI like chatbots and things like that. So with that increase in sort of, day-to-day impact, I think we're now seeing the potential for unintended effects, disparate impact, and we're also seeing a huge uptick in regulatory and compliance attention to those impacts. And legality is certainly a component of fairness in algorithms, and ethics is more a moral philosophy. But then there's also legality and regulatory compliance as well, right? All of which are related. For example, some laws are specifically around fairness, like anti-discrimination laws. And so you can kind of bunch those things in there. Now, from a project management perspective, I think also we saw that a bit with sort of data science projects. They're not like software projects in the way that we would think of how they are built based on, PMI, PMP kind of things. There wasn't always a neat fit, even with data science projects. And with AI projects specifically, there's a cycle that starts with, the problem identification, good so far, but then there's data acquisition, exploring the data, modeling your hypotheses, evaluating those hypotheses, and then going back to the problem identification. It is very much a recursive loop, I would say. Okay. Which has some challenges to it. And then each of those steps also bears with it potential risk, right? Of either choosing the wrong data sets or training the rules on data sets that might have biases based on them. The hypotheses themselves, maybe there's all kinds of sort of confirmation bias, for example, where you already think something, and so you can make your model prove that thing that you already think, this kind of thing. And so there's all sorts of areas where intentionally or no, you may end up with a system that from an engineer's perspective is buggy, right? So if, for example, a simple example would be the facial recognition example, where if you're training it on white male faces, it's going to have a higher error rate on women and people of color.
Never, why wouldn't that show up as an error?
So an error rate, that's a computational thing you can measure, right? But if you don't test for those things, you could immediately deploy a facial recognition technology in the real world, which would have a high error rate for a certain group of people. So I think this sort of awareness is growing. I'm glad to see that. And so there's sort of two sides to this. When I think about an AI practitioner, I think both of the person designing and writing the technology, but the other half of the practitioner is the user of that technology. And more often than not, it's the user of the technology which is actually held liable for the errors or consequences of their use of it. So we saw already the driver of an autonomous vehicle that struck a pedestrian was actually, you can't say, hey, the car has to, be punished, right? It's the person, the operator was held responsible for that. So, we're going to see some interesting, outcomes of this. Also, NIST has just put out for comment a draft of their risk management framework for AI, which I find really fascinating because, in addition to what you would expect from this, which is the technical design characteristics of a system, it also covers socio-technical characteristics and principles around trustworthiness, which is, again, fascinating, right? Because when you think about like other NIST standards, they were largely around technical design characteristics. And now part of their risk management framework that they're proposing includes, the societal aspect and trustworthiness aspect, which is really sort of a sign of almost the recognition that once you have a technology that in theory replaces a human intelligence, then some human characteristics are part of the risks. So, I think that this is a topic that is very important to get to especially business and technology leaders.
We are taking a break from our show to talk about gaining wisdom from our success ladder benchmark. Every software project has risk. This is a bet, just as much as buying a lottery ticket or going to casino. However, do you know your odds? Do you know how to improve your odds? Our success ladder benchmark gives you your odds of success by profiling your project against 50,000 cases in our chaos database. It also gives you hints on where you can improve your odds. There are only few inputs and 6 runs in the benchmark. After each run, the benchmark will indicate your chances of success. The Success Ladder benchmark is part of our membership. You can benchmark as many projects as you want and even play what-if games. You can change this or change that, and each run will tell you your chances of success. To get your Success Ladder benchmark, go to standishgroup.com. Now back to our show.
So I just want to point out that the Success Ladder benchmark uses artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've been doing it for 25 years. And this is how we calculate the odds. And we use our 50,000 current project case profiles using nearest neighbor technology to do this. It's a very accurate way of making predictions. And so I think if you use this, you'll get a better result from your projects. The other thing I want to point out for helping you get better results is we just released a hard copy of the latest chaos report. This is 260 pages full of full color charts and graphs, and it really helps you in terms of making your projects more successful. Now, this book is also a true collector's item. Since the last time we had a hard copy of the chaos report was in 2003. And you can get this book in our online store. But you should also note that the PDF version is included in the membership. Minerva, what about the privacy of data?
The fact that there's a lot of unstructured data that's used in training systems opens the door to potentially protected consumer data can sneak in there. And whether you have violated a data privacy law in the use of the training sets that you're using. And so in fact, a lot of the ethics is can be traced to where did and how did you collect that data, and was the appropriate, either GDPR or other rules complied with when you collected that data. So, if you think of AI as the engine, data is the fuel for that engine. So you want to make sure that the data that you're using in the engine is also clean, so to speak. Like you want to use the good fuel, and so I think that's a component that's often missed when thinking about the ethical outcomes of it. Now, the work that I am doing, at the McSilver Institute, is really twofold. It is around the concept of thought leadership on reducing the harms of the use of AI to certain groups, and specifically in the areas of racial equity, health equity, because those are the areas I think with some of the biggest potential ethical risks, as well as compliance risks. And then the flip side of that is to actively use these computational techniques to address, issues of poverty and racial and health inequities. And we've seen through the pandemic that those became incredibly obvious. And so it really is both reduce harm and increase the good. Use of AI are the main focuses of the work that I've taken on.
What about AI for good?
I think that the potential for AI for good is really limitless. One of the things that is so important to think about is, for now, the majority of investment and usage of AI is on the commercial side, meaning, companies will use it or buy it based on saving money or making more money, right? But if you shift the motive to one that is focused on improving the good, increasing equity or decreasing inequity, that is something that actually is aligned with many organizations' goals, whether they be nonprofits or governments or NGOs. And so sort of providing these incredible tools to those organizations with a different mission, I think is truly, truly powerful.
So Minerva, give us your last words on ethics in AI.
I recognize why we have to think about it now as a potential danger to humanity, because it has such potential for misuse. It has potential for fantastic use, but I think we're pretty far away. Most of the scientists that I talked to, this notion of a general problem solver, which was the original name for, is pretty far away. I mean, there's some interesting work that's being done by a number of institutes. One, was founded by Jeff Hawkins, that there are new theories of intelligence coming out all the time. So, it's funny because I originally got into, I was going to be a brain surgeon was my original dream. This is how I got into AI. And now, the use of neural networks is really based on the idea of this is how neurons work in the brain. And so, the central question is general intelligence really a machine that does what a brain does, or is it doing just specific tasks? This is a much longer argument and conversation about how would you define, the singularity in the first place. But I think, automation for sure, we can automate more and more, every day. It's almost a philosophical argument as to whether we consider that thinking and learning.
So Minerva, I want to thank you. This has been very insightful, and I'm glad you came on our show, and we hope to see you again soon.
I want to thank our guest and our panelists for being part of the show. And thank you for being part of the show. I hope we have given you a few minutes of wisdom. We look forward to seeing you next time on Wisdom Wednesday. This is your host, Jim Johnson.